Uh, Pressing record and over to you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So yes, I'd like to keep, especially if there's not huge amounts of us, I like to kind of keep the things informal. So if something's really burning, put your hand up in the chat. But we're going to cover a fair amount. I obviously in the 45 minutes, I can't give you my whole syllabus of nutrition. But I want to kind of get an idea. Has anyone got an idea? Maybe just raise your hand if you've got like if you don't know anything about nutrition or you have like a base level of nutrition. Who hasn't got any idea of nutrition?
I'm going to say I've got base level, but I should know better.
You're a chiropractor, you should know better.
Yeah, I should know better.
So who's got like some level of nutrition and okay, so cool. Fab. So I'm going to share my screen. Some of you I've met before. So right. So Owen's introduced me a little bit. The way I work as a nutritionist, there are different kind of versions of us. Some of us might just be more focused on diet and lifestyle in terms of like bulking, getting in the gym or gaining muscle or losing weight. And then there's also dietitians who might work in hospitals or working with those maybe with like type 2 diabetes or they're more working in hospital environments. The way I work is more on looking at the whole body in a holistic way. And that essentially is what functional medicine is. So I'm going to tie in bits of this. My key point here is I want you to start thinking that nutrition is a all-encompassing view on the body. And so, for example, something that might be happening in the brain could be also related to the gut. And this is what I want to kind of focus on, that looking at the root cause of health, even if it's something like mental health concerns, could be related to diet, lifestyle. But also that then led me into, I recently just got my master's in something called transdisciplinary practice. Now, no one really knows what that is, but it's essentially understanding your mindset. And so that's where I've now suddenly become this mindset coach and moving forward with looking into what is whole health. So some of you might be thinking, what has self-love got to do with nutrition and LGBTQ plus health? And I'd like to throw that out to you. So has anyone got an idea of what would self-love mean to them?
I would say, if I can, that perhaps if we love ourselves, we're more likely to feed ourselves nutritious, good food. And perhaps if you're feeling low or not full of self-love, you might not think anything about it and think, fuck it, I'm just going to eat a bag of chocolate M&Ms like I'm tempted to do.
Okay, cool. Well, in terms of like self-love, it's not only the kind of acceptance, but it's the active and ongoing process of making decisions that contribute to your overall well-being. In that, it means understanding and working towards a more positive relationship with yourself, which is very crucial in the context of LGBTQ plus health and well-being. So, where nutrition, I see that as a pillar of health. And so now, and kind of what led me up to that was a number of changes. So when I actually wrote the book, I was in a different frame of mind. I was thinking that, life was all about understanding nutrition, well-being, exercising, sleeping right, managing stress. Personally, I wasn't necessarily dealing well with a lot of things, and I wasn't really on the road to self-love that I thought I was. And I had to have the main kind of driver in that was I started to get anxious, really, really anxious, and I couldn't understand where this anxiety was coming from. Digging underneath what I was doing, I was partying a lot, I was taking drugs, I was addicted to steroids. These are things that I would happily mask, and I wasn't really on the road to self-love, and I would do a lot of things that I kind of would spend a lot of time trying to kind of back, get my energy back up again. And I was ignoring my health. And so I wasn't necessarily on the right road with nutrition. What I had to do in order to get there, I kind of healed in a very unorthodox way, which was I went down the kind of psychedelic route. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending psychedelics. I'm just saying what they work for me. And what that led to was a complete changing in my mindset. I got a complete different point of view, which opened up my mind to realizing what I was doing in terms of damaging my health, and therefore, and also changing my mindset to actually, I want to nurture what self-love is. And that's how it moved me from thinking about diet, lifestyle, exercise, vitamins, minerals, more to engaging wholeheartedly in understanding what health means to the person. And it's entirely subjective. What works for me may not work for someone else. So the barriers to self-love, there are many, and again, it's subjective, but there are societal pressures and expectations. Whilst, we're very lucky to live in a fairly free society, there are many places that do not accept LGBTQ plus identities, and that can lead to external pressures and having to hide our true self. And with that, then that may lead to internalized homophobia, so absorbing negative societal attitudes towards LGBTQ plus individuals can lead to more self-rejection and internalized shame. Body dysmorphia. This was something that I was one of my main barriers, and I was dealing with this without knowing, and I would constantly have this negative thoughts towards my body and thinking about what I could improve rather than looking at what I could accept and love. And of course, then past trauma plays a big role in what happened. So why I was probably not going down the self-love path, self-love route, was probably because of all my childhood trauma and then adolescent trauma going through that. Mental health issues can play a role. And if there's conditions like depression, anxiety, and substance use, that can play a big role in how we view ourselves and practice self-love. Fear of rejection and abandonment, and lack of representation about how we are viewed how not seeing yourself reflected in the media, literature, can contribute to feelings of invisibility and insignificance. Perfectionism, and also relationship dependencies, relying on other people for validation. So these are big barriers to self-love, and it was quite important in my own journey. So the role of nutrition, as I said, it's a pillar in the kind of self-love journey. And in that, I want you to have in mind, the biggest question I've had from releasing my book was, why do gays need different diets? And it's more about, from that, is about understanding again that nutrition can actually enhance health and well-being rather than just be viewed as a calorie in, calorie out model. So in terms of the LGBTQ plus health and well-being, it can be used in people living with HIV, for example, helping mitigate symptoms to medication or delivering certain nutrition requirements, transgender nutrition, because there's a lot of medication involved, fertility for those having a biological child. And we have to kind of realize that substance use in the gay community, some substance use happens everywhere, but in the gay community, particularly, there are certain drugs that are used and the way we party, but it's not necessarily about saying don't do that. It's about understanding a harm reduction approach. So in terms of substance use, what in my book talks about what you can do if you are going to engage in X, Y, Z, how you can feel better for the week after, and then also covers a bit around the kind of addiction side of things. Sexual health is important. We all that's quite important for all of us, whether it's bottoming or erectile dysfunction or testosterone even. Mental health, and also weight management and fitness. But there's also general health that might be tailored to the population, LGBTQ plus population. So if someone wants to bottom, for example, they are not having a digestive concern is probably that, well, really going to impact their mental well-being and sex life. And it's probably the most, like, people come to me a lot who are in the past who have been a gay man and had that kind of issue, that the IBS issue, because a lot of people suffer from IBS, and it gets in the kind of whole sex side of things, it unwraps that. So, and then there's the role of nutrition in self-perception. So balanced diets can actually support mood regulation and cognitive function. So in terms of nutrition, I think it's important to understand that a low sugar diet, having an adequate protein, is going to make you feel better. So if you are not feeling great and you're eating, peanut M&Ms, for example, Owen just told me was, or McDonald's at the time, think about what you can do to make yourself fit, improve. And this is not necessarily me telling you that you need to take all my recommendations and change your diet completely, but perhaps just lowering sugar a bit, increasing complex carbohydrates, increasing your protein and increasing your hydration. That can actually do a lot to support your mood and also be then supporting self-love. And then there's nutrient-rich foods. So an example of which is walnuts. They're shaped like a brain because they support the brain. They're full of omega-3s. So, and then there's deficiencies in minerals, vitamins and minerals. So if there's mood disorders or this can be impacted by, for example, vitamins D, vitamin B, and omega-3s. So all of this, eating well, contributes to a good positive body image and self-esteem, which is ideally what we all want. And I think we all suffer somewhat about looking at, feeling not necessarily good enough in whatever aspect that is. And it's just the role of nutrition as a pillar. What it can do is just support that area and improve your health and well-being in that. And don't forget what I said at the beginning of the talk about how nutrition is quite a holistic, looking at nutrition as all the systems working together. So perhaps consider gut health and how it's linked to mental health. Consider, not necessarily being so, I have IBS, I have depression, I have anxiety. There may be a number of variables that may be impacting what your health is, what's concerning your health. So, for example, stress and the raising cortisol, which is the stress hormone, can have a massive impact on how the gut is. And then the gut, why I talk about the gut a lot is the gut is one long tube going all the way through from the mouth to the anus. And if some things that you just want, it's sampling the outside world. And if it's not happy, then it's going to impact. There's a big gut-brain connection, and it's going to impact everything else. So nutrition is, well, it's what I've studied for 10 years, and I'm still very much in the field. And it's one of the first kind of areas that I would probably address if you're not necessarily feeling good, but and you want to change something. But my advice on changing something is going slow. Don't do everything at once, because you'll get into that. We've all been there with a diet where we go, yeah, I'll start Monday. You do all the meal prepping, you do the perfect diet, you start, you do it for 3-4 days, and then you're out, you get tempted on Thursday, Friday, and it all goes out the window. So, and this was, very much myself in that. So I wasn't necessarily initially practicing what I preached, and that could have been a lot down to my mindset and self-perception. So I had to do a lot of healing through my mindset. And what I've learned is that, again, the next pillar is understanding your mindset and understanding why you think the way you do. Ultimately, if you can just take one thing from this slide, it's just question why you think the way you do. And that in that you get to understand how much of a big control freak, whether you're a control freak or not. And you'll be surprised the amount of you'll surprise yourself when you start to be really curious about control, whether it is something that bothers, whether it is something that is important for you. Exploring forgiveness is a big one. And I think that is not necessarily directed outwards. I would explore forgiveness inside and about whether you could forgive yourself for what the past or previous relationships, or, you know, it's part of life is making mistakes. And this is important in terms of healing. I put here understanding new ways of knowing, and that essentially just means changing your reality, opening up to understanding different ways of thinking. And in that questioning about why you think the way you do, perhaps there is another way of thinking about or framing problems. And then embracing difficulty. Life isn't easy, but perhaps if life was so straightforward and linear and very easy, we wouldn't be necessarily so fulfilled. And I think it's more about embracing, I call it embracing the dance of difficulty. Things aren't necessarily, there's going to be stress, there's going to be trauma. You're not going to go, healing is a up and down journey, and you are, I think it's just embracing that. Self-awareness, as I've said, is just understanding yourself better, looking at your patterns of behavior. Why do you know, for example, I started to question why I was taking steroids, why I was partying at the weekend. I started to question, what does that mean to me? What do I enjoy from it? What do I not enjoy from it? Who am I hanging around with? Who am I not? Who, are they people that I'm getting a lot of energy from, or are they draining me? All of this, that kind of led to that. That's my burnout. And when I talk about burnout isn't I'm so stressed, I'm working 3 jobs and I'm tired all the time and I'm sleeping well. Burnout is more about things like people pleasing, things like doing things you may not necessarily feel is right for you, but you do it anyway. Always saying yes, not having boundaries. These are things that I would like you to think about. Letting go, that's another thing, is can you let go of past arguments? I think if you are perhaps had something happen, or there's certain trauma, do you find yourself reliving it and replaying it over and over again in your head, thinking about what you could have done better? Perhaps exercising letting go or being curious about letting go, that's something that I would be very much encourage you to do so. Reflexivity, this is something called where you thinking about why you think the way you do. So it's a bit almost like self-awareness, but just questioning, like, why am I binge eating? Why am I wanting to perhaps go out, or do something that's not good for me? Or even in a daily life, it's like, why am I thinking? Why am I down? Or why am I tying up? Why am I suddenly stressed? What am I tying my stress to? What does stress mean to me? This is just helps you understand yourself, understand a bit better. And then you can think that can lead on to understanding why you engage in numbing behaviors. What does that mean to you? What are your numbing behaviors? And I'm not necessarily saying here numbing behaviors are taking drugs or whatever it is. Numbing behavior could be, numbing behavior could be something like fleeing intimacy or fleeing arguments or something like that, when you're not actually to sit. It's something you constantly do that necessarily isn't getting you out of the situation that you want to get out of. So think about that. Being more gentle with yourself, that's the #1 rule, I think, as we go through all this process. There's going to be ups and downs. Exploring intimacy, this is quite a big subject, and I think we can do a whole talk on intimacy. And this is, how do you deal with relationships, and exploring that. Authenticity is one. Ripping up the carpet of pain. This is what I want to kind of spend some time talking about as part of the third pillar of health, for example, when we're looking at whole health, that is addressing the store cupboard of trauma that your body is holding that you may not necessarily know about. And for some people, that is what then leads to a lot of these other traits. But there are ways that you can actually release this trauma, and one big way of doing it is understanding the breath. And people may not think about this, but breath work is a way to be able to tap into what psychedelics do without doing psychedelics. And the benefits to breath work is that you can always stop it, and it's also legal. So I'm starting my training in breath work. What breath work does is it allows to go into the trauma at a cellular level and release it, essentially. And this is when you release that pain, you're not holding on to the stress of years and years of trauma, and it's incredible. So that's something I highly recommend engaging in. I can give you a link to there's a guy called Breath Guru. He does there's a free thing on his website you can download, and it shows it shows you a guided way of breathing. A lot of the breath work is not necessarily they're all about holding onto your breaths, and so a lot of the holotropic breathing is holding on. What a lot of us need to do is actually let go and surrender, and that will then purge the body of help purge the trauma. So a little bit easier than psychedelics. I did it the hard way first.
Can I actually jump in there? Because I've done a lot of breath work and I absolutely love it. Is it fantastic? And just to clarify, I mean, you can correct me if you may have a better understanding than me. But what I did with the group, I did it over Zoom. Actually, they do it over Zoom. And the way we were doing it was you're breathing at a basically. Normally, when you breathe, you breathe in, there's a pause. You breathe out, there's a pause. You breathe in, there's a pause. But this is about kind of really hyper oxygenating the blood by bringing in more and more and more oxygen. So you're breathing rapidly, very deeply. And what it does is it changes the blood pH chemistry, which then allows you to access a similar state to what psychedelics do. Yeah, would you
Yeah, absolutely right. There's
that's
many
something I
methods of
think
doing it. There's
breathing.
different methods of doing it. Like whatever, it's down to what the practitioner does with you at the time. There's ways of even just doing a very more passive one where you breathe in very slowly and breathe it out like you're huffing on a glass, like to clean it. But it's completely having more, because the problem is when you get to do a meditation is great, but we all sit there with chimp mind, and we all we shut our eyes and we all start thinking about the washing we haven't put on, and it's very hard to reach that level of higher consciousness in a meditation or even yoga or whatever it is, because we're not we're so distracted at the moment with our phone addictions that it's hard to just center ourselves. What the breath work does, it allows you to do it taps into what I think I'm assuming the pineal gland is whatever it releases, whether it releases DMT naturally from breathing. DMT's one of the main component in what ayahuasca is. I'm not saying you're going to have the most think of breathing like a kid's tricycle hits you in the leg in a way. Ayahuasca is like you being hit by a truck. So it's a very different. With breathing, you can manage it a little bit better. The examples are a bit different. The point of all this is start listening to yourself and start listening to understand what makes you tick. And we're all different. What makes you, I think, what makes you believe your own bullshit? That's what I had to have that kind of conversation with myself is what am I telling myself to make give myself an excuse to do X, Y, Z? And that's some of these things I've mentioned where I was doing everything I could to avoid pain or sit in pain because that's what or sit in my knowing way of being because that's what I felt comfortable in. And healing was a very foreign concept with me, and I could control it very nicely with who I saw, how I saw them, and of course what I was doing, and my, I thought I was doing great things for everything. But obviously not, and that had to come to a point where that we stopped that. So how can you embrace self-love daily? I want you to have a reasonable approach to nutrition and exercise. Don't think about doing radical, massive diets. It's overwhelming. You don't need to eat healthy, but I mean, I'm very much of that point. If you are desperate for a pizza or desperate for, and you've been trying to eat well, yes, if you eat 10 pizzas, you're going to not be good for you, but perhaps it's better to eat a burger happy than a salad sad, in that kind of thing. Training, like I said, also having the moderate approach to training. You can overtrain. Be mindful of eating. Cook if you can, because that process of cooking actually calms you and helps release digestive enzymes. And when you're eating, try not to use your phone when you're eating. Have some, or try to spend some time away from that. Mindfulness practice. We just talked about the breathing, yoga, meditation, and try also, if you haven't, cold showers. I think this is really good for helping you change your mindset without thinking too much. So essentially what I do is I just have my shower normally, and then I have a 45-second really cold shower where I do some light breathing, well, long, slow breaths. And it's amazing. It's like having that caffeine kick, and you get good focus, and you not so in your thoughts through the day. And it's also very good for you because it actually helps burn fat. So we should all do that.
Daniel, can I ask you a bit more about mindful eating? Because I eat very quickly. I don't know if anybody else inhales their food. I usually finish way ahead of anybody else I'm eating with, and I always justify it like I just like eating fast and having lots of food in my mouth at the same time. I don't know, but
Do you see eating as a chore?
no, I don't think so. I really enjoy eating, but I've heard about this kind of like you should chew every mouthful like X amount of times for some reason. But I have digestive issues, and I wondered what the advice is on.
Well, it's probably the first point I would. Well, if we got some time at the end, I'll go into a bit about digestive issues, and I can cover like how to understand digestive issues, because something like IBS, I can do it now actually. So IBS is basically a collection of symptoms. It means nothing. And I talk about this in my book. When someone has digestive issues, you do immediately think, how fast are you eating? How fast are you eating? And what's your stool like? And is it like, are you constipated, or are you like splattering the bathroom or going 4 times a day? We shouldn't necessarily, the perfect kind of bowel movement, you shouldn't necessarily have to clean much from it. How to unpick IBS, it could be food sensitivities. It could be what happens when you eat too fast or you eat fast is that you're not creating enough digestive enzymes or hydrochloric acid, so the acid from the stomach, to be able to digest the food. And you're perhaps then not, then that then goes to the next stage, and it can cause problems. There can also be levels of an imbalance in the good and bad bacteria. And all of those previous steps can lead to something called leaky gut, the one thing I haven't mentioned about digestion is stress has a huge impact on the gut. So it's and digestion is so important. We absorb everything. So it is part of, I would necessarily focus on digestion before you have a bulking diet, a weight loss diet, a muscle gain diet. Focus on getting your digestion right first, because you have to absorb what you're taking. There's no point eating 200 grams of protein plus if you're not going to absorb it. So these are important things. And on that note, self-care. So sleep is another big pillar in what we in health, but also like things that are good for us that might also make us feel good. There are just small little things, maybe like getting a facial, having a massage, going to, I don't know. These are things that are important. Setting healthy boundaries. I think this is something that I still struggle with, and this It's healthy boundaries are learning to say no, or I'm tired, I can't, and it's okay. Or perhaps it's being more assertive in certain situations. Celebrating your achievements and recognizing your progress. It can be very difficult to, it's easier to just be super hard on yourself. One thing I learned recently is that your subconscious, in a conversation with my coach, my subconscious was giving me a lot of negative talk. So I was being really hard on myself in a bid to protect myself from entering into a scenario of pain again. So it was going, you're not good enough to do that, X, Y, Z. So I wouldn't necessarily celebrate anything I was doing, but I would easily be hard on myself. Allow yourself to learn. That was also a big one for me, is just like think about, maybe be curious if that's something about what you would like to learn and do it. And it can also have a good, like even something like learning a piano, for example, or a language. It does help with neuroplasticity. And that's important because we want to have good mental health as well. Connect with supporting communities. We've got that here. I think I've got a lot of thanks for Owen, because before that I was in a really not very healthy friendship group, and I had to pull myself away from that, and I wasn't necessarily connecting in the right space. And I've now, I can dip in and out of big gay out events as I want, and that's good. Limiting triggers, that's important. Social media is designed to get you addicted, but also on social media we have we comparability factor. We compare ourselves unknowingly to other people and with their best filtered foot forward. So ultimately, be curious about what you can do, but also have fun with it. Don't make self-love something that's going to be a chore. It should be something that you embrace and you enjoy doing, and it's not a journey that is got an endpoint. You're going to have slip-ups. There's going to be setbacks, but look at it like an investment in your health. Have a moderate approach to what you do. Don't do everything at once, because you'll burn out on that. And don't think of it as like a challenge. I've conquered this. I've conquered my control, and it doesn't work like that. But the thing, like doing something daily, you get better and better at it, and that is a good, entirely subjective process. And I'm not saying my story is going to be relevant for everyone else. And if things are getting tough, there's no harm in seeking help. Get help where possible, whether it's psychotherapy, and speaking to other people. Asking for help is another big factor that we sometimes don't like to do, because we want to put the brave face on, thinking that I don't want to let someone know I'm suffering and surrender. And it's not, it's important. I think we're all here for each other, and we're all going through the same sort of life journey. So that's everything. The only thing to really say on here is so my book is on the right hand side. That talks about all things diet and lifestyle, and more on kind of mindset stuff, and what I class as the lessons from psychedelics. So almost how to love yourself is my Substack at the bottom. So that's it. I think we'll hand over to, I'll stop sharing now so I can talk to you. And I can't hear you, Owen. You're muted.
Thank you very much. I was saying thank you for that. Really enjoyed that. I had a couple of things I wanted to ask you about, but I'm not wanting to run as a chiropractor. I'm constantly being asked about people bring their shoulders and their knees, and I don't want to be that person. But
Don't mind, honestly, it's fine.
Hopefully you won't mind. Two things I'm interested in knowing your opinions on. Intermittent fasting and veganism.
Yeah.
I'll say very quickly, I've tried intermittent fasting and had a great result from that. And I felt personally better energy, better sleep, but lost weight, which kind of clashed with my goal of getting massive at the gym.
Yeah.
So, A, what do you think of that, of intermittent fasting? And B, have you ever come across that kind of wanting to intermittent fast, as I would still like to do, but knowing I want to eat 3,500 calories, or 180 grams of protein a day. And then veganism, this kind of like, the dangers of red meat and how carcinogenic it apparently is. And I watched You Are What You Eat recently, this 4-part Netflix series, which was really, really interesting. And such a consumer, because within the first episode, I had booked a DEXA scan to get my body fat analysis done, and I signed up to Zoe, only to then cancel Zoe. But I've got the box here, and I haven't put anything on because I want my money back. So yeah, what are your thoughts on intermittent fasting and
So,
trying to gain weight, and then veganism?
yeah, and also our talk, when we talk briefly about kind of like these sensationalist headlines. I mean, they're designed to, and even programs like, I've been asked to go on programs before to promote a certain point of view. And when I'm like, no, I can't really say, and they'll twist, even if I've done things, they twist it how they want to say. So it's what's going to be the shocking factor in terms of looking at I've forgotten the first one, but we do veganism. Well, the intermittent fasting. So intermittent fasting is what intermittent fasting is going a set period without food. And it doesn't necessarily mean 24 hours. It can be different ways of doing it. So 12 hours away from food, 16 hours away from food. So people do the 16-8. And there's ways of doing it. So whether you skip breakfast or skip dinner. Where the complications come in is it's very, in studies and research, it's very good for longevity. But longevity in studies, you're not necessarily, a study might be looking at a Chinese woman and how they, without doing exercise. So they don't necessarily understand, in a micro level about whether it applies to you. Intermittent fasting, so you want to eat 3,500 calories in those 8 hours. For me, when I intermittent fast, I'm less hungry than I am when I don't. So you still have to eat the calorie amounts and the protein in if you still want to gain muscles. Otherwise, you will lose. You're eating less than you need to. You will lose weight. But for me, intermittent fasting is not good if you're super stressed, because you want to. You don't, because most people also have coffee in the morning, and in fasting you can still have that, and it can increase adrenaline, cortisol. I think if it's something that you don't have to do intermittent fasting every day as well. It's something I practice intuitively. Like I don't feel like having breakfast today. So think about that. Veganism is by the way, all these are covered in my book, by the way. You should read it. If veganism is like the whole kind of studies around like red meat being, awful for us. They're looking at things that are like real processed food. So if you get an organic, free range, I don't know, like steak, it's going to be a lot different from getting, like a steak, a frozen steak from Iceland or whatever it is. What they don't, there's a lot, in terms of the veganism, it's possible that you can do it healthily, but a lot of people, not many people do it right. And it's more about when people quote a lot of studies around it, there's a lot of issues with those studies. You have to make sure that you're getting good levels of vitamin D and K and protein levels. And a vegan has to combine to make complete their proteins. So for example, you might finish the gym and have a whey protein shake. The vegan ones are usually the new ones. The vegan ones are all combined proteins, so pea, rice, hemp, or something. The hemp, on its own, for example, doesn't have enough of the amino acids to be a complete protein. So if someone's living on chickpeas, for example, as their protein, as a vegan, it's not healthy because it's far inferior to a chicken breast. That said, then considering like all this factory made or lab made meat, we don't know what that does to us compared to what I fully understand the ethical considerations around veganism from a practical point of view. We don't know what it long term. You don't know, and it's different for male, different for female. You have to, maybe it impacts bone density. So, and so you have to, if you're going to be a vegan, you have to make sure you can do it healthy, but you have to make sure you're combining your proteins, getting enough, and also there will be some supplements that you probably have to take.
Thank you. And I just asking for the benefit of everyone. I will, of course, be finishing your book very, very soon and learning even more.
Page 3 at the moment.
I'm on the introduction. I'm on the about the author section. Does anybody else have a question that they wanted to ask so I don't dominate here? And I do have more. I could ask you 1,000 questions, but I don't want to take over too much.
Yeah, I was just
I
gonna say,
have
Owen.
one.
Oh, great. We
Sorry,
got
go ahead.
Chris and then Omar.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna echo what you were saying, Owen. I've watched some of those on Netflix too now, and I've become my husband Nick has been trying to get me to try like plant-based diets, like with the corn products, the QURIN.
Mhm.
And for the longest time I avoided them. And then after watching a couple of these documentaries, I've become a bit more plant-based inclined. And so I found products that they don't taste as bad as the ones Nick introduced me to. So we haven't quite gone vegan, but we like to call it flexitarian, I guess, if that's the right word. But
I think that's the plant-based is very healthy. We need plants, and corn has got some health benefits to it. But in a lot of these plant-based foods, there's a lot more ingredients that you may not understand. So like fake bacon and all the additives they add to it, that's the things I would avoid more than anything. That's
okay.
But like, there's no harm in us. If you're eating meat 6 times a day, of course, it's going to might be an issue for you. And it's the quality of the meat you have. So my meat consumption has dropped, but I will maybe buy organic more, or organic eggs, and try to go have that approach, because the nutrition profile is much better.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing too now. I'm incorporating more plant, not just like products, but actual fruits and vegetables as well, and trying to minimize the beef, things of that nature. So just for the eco impact as well.
Absolutely, good thing to do.
Omar?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I used to be vegetarian, then pescatarian, then I do now intermittent fasting. So I'm trying to find the best thing that matches or works with my body. And I've been eating more organic as well. And I've been thinking about something. I don't know if you have any information about it, but the hardest thing to get fed from your body is the antibiotics we get from eating chicken or like animal products. Is that correct?
Don't hold me to this, but I think in the UK and the EU, we have a lot better welfare standards than the US. But what the chicken eats also is what you're eating. So think about that. But yes, I don't think, like, you know how the people at supermarkets make a big thing about corn-fed chicken breast being amazing. No, the corn's not necessarily the best thing for us to eat because it's a high GMO food. And then the chicken's eating that, then we're eating that. With there, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you can, like, depending on I always say buy the best quality for your budget. And meat should not cost £1. It's not, and you think about and that's the kind of the best way to look at it. On a note of vegetarianism and veganism, about what you should do and whether you should be following this, what the other, it's what works for you. So I know I'm not going to be a very good vegan because regardless of the ethical reasons, or a vegetarian, if I increase my dairy and just have that as my sole protein, I get really bad skin when I eat dairy. So it's like going to have it doesn't agree with me, and my digestion is going to be upset. So the flexitarian approach is more, unless you have some dire ethical reason, I would encourage the flexible approach, plant-based, making sure we all should be hitting, for the average kind of per kilo of body weight, minimum 1 gram or 1.5 grams of protein for that per day. that's why I'm saying when I go back a few slides and talk about protein nourishing you, it helps you keep you full. And so that's, you got to think about how you do that with, if you're changing your diet, think about how you're doing that, how you're going to increase that. So an egg is 7 grams of protein, a chicken breast is 30. So you realize now, like, to get even 100 grams of protein, it's an effort. Yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask you another question. Does anybody else have a question before I jump in with another one?
I do have one.
Yeah.
Daniel.
Peter.
Especially in terms of London, what do you think about those food delivery companies like Fresh Fitness Food?
I used to work for them back in the day. I used to do all that. Like, I also then got the natural fitness food. I find them very it's like, my personal opinion, nutritionally, they can be they like, natural fitness food they can be down to your macros, work, there's adequate nutrition in them. My bugbearer with them is that it feels like they've gone rice. It's the same kind of meal with different variations in each, and it feels a bit packaged. I used to think that I just want a whole home cooked food after a week of eating that. However, it does the job in terms of eating well and hitting the goals of what you need to do. Maybe if you're in a halfway house, would be one of these recipe boxes. But they are logistically a nightmare to cancel. So like Mindful Chef is one, or it's Green Chef, or yeah. Yes, exactly. So it's just watch out if they're like super carby, and look at their ethical, what they're, a lot of the fresh ones that are delivery ones, they're not going to have good quality steak because they're, making, unless they say so. But something like Mindful Chef might have ethical salmon, for example, or wild salmon. So
Thank you. And any more questions? I wanted to ask you a question. Oh, Chris, you unmuted yourself.
Just, yeah, real quick. You mentioned the connection with the gut and inflammation that comes from stress these days. Do you have any nutrients or products that you recommend that help with anti-inflammation? I've heard of like turmeric and black pepper.
It's good, but it's hard to. So the reason why I probably haven't mentioned supplements in this call is because supplements are very individual, and they can interact with people, but there's a lot of bullshit out with supplements. So it's like what you want to. Supplements have a place, but I would use a food first approach, and it's about the quality of the supplements you buy. In terms of turmeric, the food is okay, but it's not going to necessarily, when they say turmeric's really good, you would need to have that in a supplement for the dose of it, which is things like, but it will always help. It's always nice to have it, but yeah, with things that help reduce inflammation, bone broth is really good for the gut in that respect. It's very full of collagen, amino acids. It's got a lot of, it's good for gut healing. And if you make it yourself, even better. What else? Collagen's good, which if you want to buy that separately. What would I also, omega-3s are important for inflammation, but again, that comes from salmon. We forget that nuts are a powerhouse of nutrients. Walnuts are shaped like a brain because they help our brain. Brazil nuts, even just 2 of those a day, help you increase your daily dose of a daily dose of selenium, which is hugely deficient in our soils. So inflammation wise, but to encourage gut, have an experiment with kefir. You can get your own grains and make it yourself. That's something if you're not intolerant to dairy, if you are, you can get a water-based kefir. But having some of that is like that Zoe shot or whatever it is they do. So
I take kefir every morning. Good. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'll start taking kefir now as well. My question was actually about supplements. So I was going to ask you if you had like a top 3 supplements that you recommend everybody take, and another top 3, or if they're not the same ones, for people who are going to the gym in particular.
Okay,
if you're not into supplements, or that it's not something you recommend talking about.
So I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. So I'm just gonna say, like, most of us are vitamin D deficient in the winter, because the UK, even in summer. So if you can perhaps, vitamin D is often advised, even by the NHS, to supplement. When you look at vitamin D, it's a vitamin D3 you want to buy. But with vitamin D, you can overdose it. So you don't want to take it a high dose forever. So that's why I say encourage testing. I like, there's a brand I use called Feel Multivitamin. I think they're one of the best multivitamins in the market. And I'm not affiliated with them at all. I wish I was. They give me free vitamins, but they have really good qualities in terms of dosages, plus the right form of the nutrient enabled for it to do its action. Otherwise, you buy a vitamin from Boots, Tesco, whatever it is, it's crap. It's not going to work. So with supplement quality, it's like how the same philosophy as food. You want to get kind of good quality, but in how to do that is to look at the labels and understand the type of vitamins that you're having and the amount of it. If something's got maybe like 1 milligram of B6 in it, for example, you can get that from food. Go and eat something, But the Phil ones are good. If you don't eat fish, I think omega-3s are important to take, which there are vegan versions of now. Again, it's around the quality of it. Gym supplements, I think it's creatine is probably the one scientifically backed supplement to take if you're wanting to gain muscle. What it actually is it's like it attaches to your energy pathways and helps a bit more energy. So it's good to take, and it helps you gain helps gain muscle that way. With protein powders, it's again because a lot of them can cause a lot of GI distress, especially whey protein. Getting a good quality protein is important. I would probably say, I'm trying to think, the best one, I think it's called Mother Earth protein. Vegan ones, I use one on Amazon, which is a Swedish brand. I forget the name, but it's problem with vegan ones are not so tasty. But I can put it in the chat afterwards in the WhatsApp.
Yeah, brilliant. I'd appreciate that. I just had a notification on my laptop saying my battery's about to die. So I guess I'll have to bring it to an end anyway.
One way to get rid of me.
I mean, I could plug it in, but then I'll have to disconnect something else. So I think it's 8 o'clock anyway. And I'm personally very, very grateful that you've done this, really passionate about, sharing members' knowledge and advice. And it's just wonderful that you give us an hour of your evening to help us. So I really appreciate it. And I know that, we were 8 or 9 in the end, but there are people who are going to be watching when I post this on the content part of the site. So I know they'll be very grateful for your time as well. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you everyone else who came as well. And I'll be posting this over the next couple of days so we can share it for other people to see. So if you know someone else who would benefit from it, then you can share the link with them too. So that's it. Thank you so much for this evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Okay, I'll see you on the events.
Let's see you soon.
Bye.
Take care.